Hello everyone, welcome back. This is the video I want you to see for lesson number 2. Now the objective of lesson number 2 is to organize data efficiently using a database management system. So I'm going to start by showing you this Excel file that was being used in my unit to keep track of employees attending training. So every time we needed to do a new entry, we typed in the employee's ID, first and last name, the phone number, the day the training took place, which training they took, and whether that training will be a one-day or a workshop. So the first problem that we found with this approach is that if we need to enter data for an employee who already took training, so let's say Jennifer Sanon, she's coming back to take another training session, so now I will have to type her employee ID, and then of course her first name, and then her last name, which is information that I already had on the list. So right from there, you see that by taking this approach, you're going to have to be repeating information that was already contained on your list. So this is the first inefficiency that we found on this approach. But let me finish the entry over here. So let's say she came now for an Access Visual Basic for Applications training, and this Access Visual Basic is a one-day class, so I'm going to have to type again the fact that this is a one-day class. So once again, with this approach, one of the things that's going to happen is that you're going to have to be repeating information that is already on the system. So in order to deal with this problem of having to retype data that was already on the system, we came up with this idea of creating a new Excel file where the data will be separated into different spreadsheets. The first group that we see here is the students group. Now on the students group we put the student ID, the first and the last name, the phone number. Now if more information needs to be tracked later on about the employee, such as the email address or the managers for that employee, this information can be entered in this table. Now another table we have is the classes table. Now on the classes table we just put information about the classes, such as the name and whether this class is a one-day or a workshop. Now in this table we also gave each one of these classes an ID. So the idea is that from now on, if anybody's coming to take Access VBA, instead of me having to type the name and the type of class, I will just simply type the ID for that class. Now with students, we also gave students IDs. So if I need to register Jennifer for another class, instead of typing the first and the last name, I will just simply need to type the employee IDs. This information is now going to be tracked on the attendance table. So let me show you what the attendance table looks like. So in this table, I'm only going to record the employee ID, the class ID, and the date that the class took place. So if I want to register an entry over here for Jennifer because she took Access VBA, I will have to type in Jennifer's ID and the ID for that class. Now, this is going to present another challenge over here, because now in order to retrieve Jennifer's ID, I have to go back to my student table, look for Jennifer, and either memorize the ID or maybe I can copy and paste. Okay, but now that I know the ID, 111-5993, I can come back over here and type it in, 5933. Now, for the class ID, I'm going to have the same challenge. So if I remember the class ID, which I probably won't, then I have to go back to the classes and then find out that Access VBA is class ID number 5, and then I will come back over here and I will type it in, and the dates where the class took place, so I should know that information, so I'll just type it in. Okay, so that's one of the challenges I'm going to have with this approach now. Okay, so we now no longer have the problem of having to retype data that is already on the system, but there are some other problems that may come up. So let's say that when you type Jennifer's ID, you made a mistake typing the ID. So instead of the ID ending on 33, it should have ended on 35. So you come to the student table and you made that correction. But now you're going to have an ID on the student table that doesn't correspond with the ID that you had previously entered on the attendance table. And that's going to be a big problem. And I know you can do a find and replace, but if instead of 32 records, you have 32,000 records, there's going to be a lot of find and replace that you have to do. Another problem you may find is that when you're typing the employee ID or the class ID, let's say I type the ID of a class that doesn't exist. So let's say I type 28. If I look at the classes table, there isn't a class with that ID. So now, once again, I have a problem with my data over here. And the reason this happens in Excel is because Excel doesn't have referential integrity checking that is built into some other database systems such as Microsoft Access. If I move this data into an Access database, then I can set up some rules so a user cannot type a class ID that doesn't exist on the classes table. Also, if someone needs to make a change on any of the students' ID, like the change that we made with Jennifer before, then Access will check if this ID is also on the attendance table, and every instance of the ID that is on the attendance table will be automatically updated as you make changes on the student table. So that's an option that you have also in Microsoft Access. What I like to do now is to show you the Access database that we created for our unit to keep track of attendance. So once again, this is the database that we created to keep track of the attendance in our classes. So this database is going to be opened by the employee as they come for training. So now the first thing they're going to do is they're going to have to select over here whether they came for the one-day class or the 2 hours workshop session. So if they pick one-day class, then they will see a combo box over here with the label that reads class, and as they go through the list, they're going to be able to select which class they're here for. Now, if they click the 2 hours workshop, then you notice that the label over here changes from class to workshop, and also the list is going to be updated, and it's now going to reflect only those classes that are taught on a 2 hours workshop format. So let's say that Jennifer comes to the class, and she's taking that Visual Basic class that we already entered in Excel. So she'll have to click the one-day class, and then she'll select the Access VBA class from the list, and then she'll type in her employee ID. So I believe there's 1115933. Now when she taps out of this box, the database is going to retrieve the first and last name for that particular employee if the employee is already on the list. So now if we're dealing with an employee who is coming to training for the first time, then the employee will have to type in the employee ID and then fill the first and last name and the phone number, and that information will also go into the database. Now on our Access database, we included another table to keep track of the instructor teaching the class. So again, we created a table with instructors, and we gave each one of the instructors an ID. So the employee student will pick whichever instructor he's taking the class with, and once he's finished filling all this information here, they will click on Submit, and then there will be another window over here indicating that the information is saved, and that once they click Close, the database will close and the information will be recorded in our database. Okay, so I'm going to open the database again, but this time I'm going to hold the Shift key down so you get to see this section of the database that you didn't see before. So this is the so-called navigation pane, and right here you're going to see the different objects of your database. So we're going to start with tables, and you notice that the same tables that you see over here are the same ones that we had on our Excel file. So we had back there an attendance table, we have the classes table, and we have participants table, even though in Excel we call them students. Now on our Access database, we have a new table that we added over here to keep track of who is teaching the classes. So the instructors table, I'm going to open it now, and I want you to see the 5 different instructors of our unit. Now I want you to remember that when we enter data for Jennifer for the Visual Basic class, we said that Mark was the instructor who taught that class. So I want you to remember that Mark's ID is number 3, and I want you to remember that because now I'm going to open the table attendance, which is the one that we use to keep track of the attendance. So, and I'm going to go all the way down, and I'm going to let you see the last record over here. And so you can verify that the a new entry was made for Jennifer Sano. You probably remember her ID now. And also that VBA class, which have an ID of 5, is shown here, as well as the ID for Mark. Now, when you look at data on a table like this, of course, it's going to be confusing. It's not going to make too much sense to you to look at this data because this data only have the IDs, and it doesn't have the actual name that those IDs corresponds to. But in Access, you have the option to create an object such as a query, and I'm going to show you this query over here that shows data similar to the attendance table. But in this query, instead of displaying the IDs, we make a change over here so the actual data it's what you're going to see. So instead of seeing Jennifer's ID, you see her name. Instead of seeing the ID number 5 for Access VBA, you see the name, and the same thing goes for the instructor. Okay, so now how do you create these queries? That's something we're going to do on another chapter. But what I really want you to have clear now is the concept that when you need to create a new database, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to separate all the data that you need to include on your database. You're going to place it on different tables. Okay, and the information that you're going to put on those tables is the data that relates to that particular group. So for instance, on the instructors table, you're just going to add information that relates to instructors. So right now you have the first and the last name. Maybe later on you need to enter also the instructor's phone number and maybe the email address. So this is a place where you can to add that information. Now, when you need to create a new database, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to separate your data into different groups, and you're going to put in those groups the data that is related, just as we did with the instructors data, the participants, and the classes. Also, you're going to find a table or two that is going to relate to the other tables. So in our database, if I show you something over here we call the relationships, you're going to see a diagram that clearly shows the relationship between the attendance table and the other 3 tables on our database. We say that the attendance table relates to the other tables because it has something that is common with each one of the other 3 tables. So for instance, the class ID, which is on the attendance table, you also find it on the classes table, and something similar happens with the participant ID and with the instructor ID. The format that you see over here is the format that you're going to follow with each and every database that you need to create. And this is the end of lesson number 2. So now let's move on to another lesson where we're going to start working with tables.